On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the container ship Maersk Shekou crashes into the sailing vessel Leeuwin in the port of Fremantle, Australia. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So I always know it's a bad day when my phone starts going off and I start getting DMs, tweets, emails from around the world, in this case from down under, from Australia. Container ship coming into the port of Fremantle crashed into a sail training vessel, causing extensive damage to both the sail vessel and injuring two crew members. We're going to take a look at this and, more importantly, look at past entrances by the ship into the port and try to figure out what exactly happened. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out. I'm going to reference you over to two stories. This one by Channel 9 News down in Australia. Iconic sailing ship smashed to pieces after container ship collision at Perth Port. And then this one from ABC Australia News. 2 men injured after sail training ship Leeuwin is hit by large container ship at Fremantle Port. Fremantle, Perth on the same area. So you'll see Fremantle and Perth used here. Shipping question is the sail training ship Leeuwin, Leeuwin number 2 to be exact. Ship was built back in 1986. It is not a museum ship. It is a sail training ship. And based on testimony and people talking about this is a ship that's iconic along the Fremantle waterfront. And many people have taken their days sailing on this vessel, especially school children. And I love sailing vessels, absolutely enjoy them, including replica vessels like this. I think you really don't appreciate sailing until you get out on, climb up on a mast and be out there. One of my favorite things to do. So here are the after photos, and really tragic. Fortunately, the 2 people who were on board, 2 were injured. They were sleeping below deck. They got hurt evacuating the vessel as the rigs were coming down. The report is one has suffered a broken arm. You can see Leeuwin right here, and then off to the side there you see the Maersk Shekou. Now what's interesting here is the weather is remarkably different than what it was coming in. If you saw the video at the very beginning, a lot of rain, wind coming in. We're going to talk about that being a factor as the ship comes in. Here is a corner of the pier that the Maersk Shekou hit. They kind of sideswiped it coming in, and so they hit that corner, and you'll see damage to the starboard quarter of the container ship. They actually hit the museum, took off a little piece of the museum. The museum was closed this morning but reopened shortly thereafter. No major damage. And then here is the image from a still camera, a surveillance camera. You can see Leeuwin with her full mast and rigs up, and then after the fact you'll notice that the Maersk container ship here is anchored. The port anchor is down. They have tugs on her. She was coming in with 4 tugboats on her, the same exact way she had come in the previous times into the harbor. We're going to look at some past entrances into the harbor for this vessel. And then here it is Dismasted. It looks like, based on images, the bow of Maersk Shekou came over the top of Leeuwin and knocked the mast down. There's actually evidence of some of the rigging up on the bow of the Maersk vessel. So what this did was collapse the rigs. It doesn't appear any hull damage was done to Leeuwin, which is really good, meaning they can probably rebuild the masts, get new masts set into it. The issue is when you knock one mast over, they tend to take the others because they're all tied in together for strength. And then here is the stern of the Maersk container ship. You'll notice this scrape down the side, the white scrape here, and then if you notice this kind of black hole right here, it's a black hole with a piece of concrete jammed into it, so they've penetrated through the hull. The watertight integrity of the vessel has been compromised. Here's the weather for Fremantle over the past week. The event took place early in the morning of Friday, August 30th, around 6 a.m. You see fairly light winds here, but again, this is the wind in Fremantle. It's not the weather off the coast, but most importantly, there were rain and storms that morning coming in. Here is Maersk's schedule for the Maersk Shekou. 8,814 TEUs, ship built back in 2010. Singapore flagged. Vessel was scheduled into Fremantle on 30 August with a departure on 1st September. Ship was then heading over to Port Klang, over to Tanjung Pelepas, and then Singapore. All of that is down near Singapore and on the Malaysian coast. and then back to Melbourne and Adelaide. The vessel ran a pretty set route between the ports in and around Singapore and along the southern coast of Australia, the east and west coast. Over to marine traffic for a little bit more information. 13.3 meter draft, length overall 332.74 meters, width of 43.28 meters. So not the largest container vessel by any means, but a large container vessel for this port, as we'll see. So definitely an issue, especially a loaded container ship. You'll have a lot of sail area coming in. The wind and currents do have an impact on container vessels with those large container stacks on board. Here's that route for Maersk Shekou, as you can see it coming from Malaysia and Singapore right to the southern coast of Australia and back again. I ran this out for several months, and this is the set track line it has, hitting the ports along the southern coast of Australia, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and then over to Fremantle. The ship sailed from Adelaide on 19 August and actually arrived off the coast of Fremantle just a few days later. So it had been sitting off the coast waiting for an entry into the port for over a week, steaming around, just kind of carving holes into the ocean, waiting to get in. So here's the track of Maersk Shekou coming in. One of the things you'll notice here is some weather, about 20 knots of wind coming in from the southwest. There's also a swell of about 2.5 meters, waves of about 1.5 meters. So this is an area here where we're seeing a lot of swell coming in. Now, Maersk Shekou is going to be met here by the Genesis. That is a pilot boat bringing out the pilot. We know that there were 2 pilots on board this vessel to bring the vessel in. They met the vessel out at the Fairway landfall buoy, and the ship is following the designated track in buoys and port here. And then when we see the tugs coming out to greet her, here are 4 tugs heading out. 3 of them are Schweitzer tugs. These are vessels that are owned and operated by Maersk, although Maersk is demerging from Schweitzer. And the other one is the Rivervas Emma. And here is Maersk Shekou coming in. So I shifted over to the nautical chart feature of marine traffic. The numbers you're seeing there are depths in meters. Maersk Shekou is beginning to make a turn to the left at this time. She is increasing up speed just a little bit. She had been down to about 5 knots. Coming down, she's picking up speed here a little bit. She has Schweitzer Redhead off her stern, and she's getting ready to pick up the rest of the tugs as she makes her approach and line up on the range heading into the port. So here's the ship. She's making her turn to the left. You'll see the tugboats coming in. Zoom in here a little bit, and you'll see all the tugs lining in. As we come abeam of the entrance buoys in, marking the channel, you'll see that Maersk Shekou now is at about 9.9 knots as she makes her approach in. Speed still at 9 knots, starting to come down. We're at 8.5 here, about 8.4, down to 7 knots. Now, right here, this stands out. The ship has not started its turn yet. And I'm going to show you this track matched up with its previous time in port. The ship is not making a track. In other words, it is not turning at all. There does not appear to be any turn. The speed is just coming off from 9.9 knots when it entered those first outer buoys, now at 7.2 knots. And the ship is now just starting to begin a slight turn to port and begin its deviation, but by this point it is too late. 7 knots. Coming in, you can see the tugs on the quarter here backing off. That tells me they're taking a strain on their lines coming in. Same thing with the tugs here. They seem to be wanting to kind of rein back in on the vessel and get some control over her. But they can't. You see the hit right there. It's not exactly a clear hit. Let's go ahead and go to the satellite map here where you can see a little bit more of the image. Schweitzer Falcon got herself in a really bad position here between the ship and the side of the port. We know that this stern is going to swing in. This is where right here they ate out the corner of the pier and they hit the structure right here of the museum. Go ahead and let this play a little bit. You can see Schweitzer Eagle coming out, and now you see the ship making that swing to the left there. It's at this point that the bow had come over the top of Leeuwin, took away the mast, demasted the vessel. The mast came crashing down Obviously, that's when one of the crew members got injured. We'll see the stern there kind of crashing up against it. It doesn't come physical there in it, but close enough to get hit. You can see Schweitzer Eagle coming around, and they're grabbing the ship, slowing it down at this point as Maersk comes down. We believe they dropped an anchor at this point, and now we're going to see the ship setting back in, trying to get a handle on it, and the ship is going to come back to rest over here. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward here a little bit, and you'll see the movement. I should note the timestamp down here is UTC time. Perth, Fremantle, 8-hour difference, so they're 8 hours ahead of UTC time. And now you see the vessels coming into position here, trying to hold the Maersk Shekou in position until they can assess damage. And eventually what they're going to do is move the vessel up to its berth here where it's at currently. So what I pulled up for you here is a side-by-side or top-to-bottom comparison of Maersk Shekou's arrival into Fremantle on the morning of 30 August with the last time it came in, which was 3rd of July. Now, I went back 3 other voyages to look at this, and all the earlier voyages are pretty similar. There's not a lot of differences here. So what you're going to see here is the big difference in the most recent arrival versus that. A couple of things to take note of. Number one, on the bottom here, this is the arrival on 29 August. One of the things you see here is the ship is coming in at 9.9 knots. 4 tugs alongside, very similar to what you see in the past ones. In the arrival on 3 July, 4 tugs alongside, 2 in the quarter, 2 on the side. Ship coming in at 8.7 knots, so about a knot slower. Doesn't sound like a lot, but remember, in the most recent case, the one that took place on 30 August, Maersk Shekou is coming in with about 20 to 25 knots behind her. There's rain, reduced visibility, so the weather conditions are a bit different. So here are the both vessels moving, and you'll see the speeds being a bit different. And that speed difference, I think, is really key. You're seeing the ship approach from July slowing down quite a bit. So I paused it and zoomed in here a bit. So when you look at the 3 July, Maersk Shekou coming in at 6.6 knots. It's a beam of the buoys right here. But notice it's starting to take a little bit of a northward track. In other words, it's starting its turn at that moment. Down here, Maersk Shekou on 30 August, coming in about a knot and a half faster, almost 2 knots faster, and it has not yet begun to make its turn. And I think that is a fairly significant issue. So here are the movements again. You see the ship coming in on 3 July, it's making its turn, whereas the ship below does not make its turn until it's hit and was doing much less, only 5.5 knots. You can see the position of Leeuwin right here where the ship came over the top of it. Maersk Shekou demasted the vessel. But here, Maersk Shekou back from 3 July, much further out in the channel, 5.6 knots coming in, definitely a few knots slower. The question really comes into what accounts for that. Is it the weather and wind? Is that giving the ship the extra few knots that is pushing the vessel in? Videos of the event show the vessel sounding the horn, realizing that they were coming in to Extremis, so they were announcing that they were coming in. Rain, but not terrible rain. The visibility wasn't great, but you could still see the entire vessel. So definitely a poor weather conditions in the area. But the questions I have based on this analysis of looking at the marine traffic, looking at the videos is, number one, did the ship take the speed off coming in? In other words, did they slow down soon enough to start losing speed? Based on the previous voyages, they were much slower coming into the turn than they were here. So too much speed. Now, was the speed on them because of the wind behind them? Did they need to back down a little more? Did they need the tugs to pull back on them a little more? That's a question. Did they start their turn? Did they turn late? Reduced visibility? Did they miss the order to put the helm over and start turning? Because one of the things we see is this is a really narrow little area in which to turn around in. This basin is not a lot. You have got to kick that stern out and make sure you're north of the track here so that your stern doesn't crash into the pier down here, which is exactly what happened in the case of Maersk Shekou coming in on 30 August. So obviously the Australian Maritime Security Agency is going to take a look at this. There's going to be an investigation done by the Australian authorities coming in. I'm not sure if I got the AMSA acronym right. I apologize. But they're going to do an investigation in this. Obviously, the ship is going to have to be repaired. Leeuwin is going to have to be repaired. There's going to be a long, drawn-out event. A lot to look at. We will bring you some more updates as they come in. I had a lot of people, and I want to appreciate everybody. I can't name you all. I literally had 20 emails and texts and messages come in within the first hour of this happening, and then many more afterwards. So I appreciate everyone letting me know. I wanted to put a video together for all the what's going on with shipping fans in Australia. The reason this video is dropping at midnight on the US East Coast is because it's noontime over in Australia. I want to make sure it's out there for tomorrow, for the next day out there, to give them a little bit of analysis of what I saw happen. If you enjoyed today's video, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit the super thanks button down below, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly or yearly subscriber. I'm going to have the webpage for Leeuwin on there. I'm sure they're going to be trying to raise money to help rebuild the vessel, maybe to do something for the 2 crew members who were injured. Hey, go ahead, support them, give them all the support you can. This vessel seems like a massive treasure on the west coast of Australia. One of the few places I've never been on this planet is Australia. I've been on 6 of the 7 continents, but I've never been to Australia. It's one of my goals to get down to Australia. And one of my real goals is get over to the west coast of Australia, Perth, Fremantle, even up onto the northwest coast there, Darwin. Love to go see Australia and really spend some time there. But it's kind of hard. It's on the other side of the planet, and I just haven't gotten there yet, but I will. Until our next episode, this is Sal, signing off.